Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the channel. This is Teva Talks. I'm your man of the hour, Teva, and today we're covering a book that I've been looking forward to for a while, doing a review on. It is quite a doozy and has been talked about by many different channels throughout many different years for a lot of reasons. The book, of course, in question is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. What a fucking name. So the way the story of House of the Leaves unfolds starts with our first protagonist and narrator, Johnny Truant, who is this young man living in LA during the late 90s as a tattoo artist. One night, Johnny and a buddy of his decide to clear out the apartment of their recently deceased neighbor, Zampano. Zampano is this old man who was very solitary and not much was known about him. But when they go to his place, they discover he had left behind this enormous collection of manuscripts and notes regarding this fictional documentary he claims to have seen named The Navidson Record. I also should mention Zampano was blind. So we have Johnny reading through this blind man's account of this documentary, which he can't find any evidence of it existing, but Zampano treats as a very real thing, almost rating it as an academic study of what the film is and what impact it led to. The main documentary in question follows the story of Will Navidson, who is this Pulitzer-winning photographer who decided to move into this new house in Virginia with his family, the house on Ash Tree Lane. This is the very center of the story, as this house is the very House of Leaves that the story is referring to in the title. And at first everything is fine, he's just there to document him and his family starting anew, trying out to be a new family and really strengthen the roots together, until one day after they return, he starts to notice the house has grown different on the inside. The size of the house is actually bigger from what it is on the outside. And it's only by a tiny bit, like only just a quarter inch. But it's enough to start turning screws loose in his head and making this whole place an obsession instead of just a home. Before long, the house begins to grow even more into this 5.5 minute hallway. And he starts to document and explore it. As Johnny reads this, his story unfolds in the footnotes along with Zampano's, and there's even a different set of characters called the editors, who are the people in charge of the story that we have in our hand, who had compiled everything from Johnny. I know, there's a lot of layers to this story. The horror aspect really comes from this house and how eerie this thing is, that this space that just opens up, and it's almost just this endless labyrinth as people explore it. It grows, it changes. There's this growling noise people hear every time the house shifts, and there may or may not be a monster hiding within it. And as Johnny reads this and his story progresses alongside and in parallel with our story of the house, he starts to lose his fucking mind. And it becomes very evident that this house may still be having an effect on him and on us even as a reader. One of the biggest appeals for me about House of Leaves is just how awesome it is structured. There's so many different ways of reading it. There's no wrong way or right way. You can choose to read the footnotes along with the story as it comes out on the page, or you can choose to skip over it or read it afterwards. There's no set limit on what you can or cannot do with this story. It is very much open to your own interpretation and your own way of seeking it. Yes, it is a very playful novel, very ambitious. There's different fonts for the different characters being discussed. I believe Johnny writes in something called Courier, so it's almost like this typewriter font, and Zampano writes in this very posh New Times Roman font, and then there's other characters later on, like the editors or even Pelafina's story, which is included in the appendices at the end of this novel. Is this a horror novel? A lot of people define it as such, but it really is open to how you read it, because there's no right genre for this book. It's very postmodern, it's very playful, but it is also very personal as well. And this house almost becomes a representative for so many different things. It could be language that constantly changes meaning. It could be our own sense of repressed traumas and desires that evoke this sense of dread upon the people that start to explore it. And I love it because this is as much of an experience as it is a book. This is probably got to be the only book that you can't actually read aloud, because everything changes further along with the text appearing in different styles, and even parts of the book where there's only a few words in the page, and so you might be reading one chapter that's super dense and filled with labyrinths of text that run alongside each other in very non-conventional ways, and then there might be a chapter further ahead where you're just zooming through the book, reading 100 pages within 10 minutes. And that is all very intentional. It is all to draw the reader into the experience of what these characters might be going through, and to evoke the sense of place in what the house is and what it is like to experience it. It's such a fucking good read for the amount of time and dedication the author put into researching things. There's sources that are real and there's many that are not, and references to everything. You know, we have the writer Borges, Jorge Luis Borges, which I'll talk about in a different video. We have architecture being discussed, even a section of the book where it is all these real life people talking about it as if they were affected by it in a very real way. And I love that because it plays with this very meta layer of narrative about our connection to how we discuss the meaning in stories, and how we actively seek out making meaning of things that may or may not actually be just meaningless, or, you know, unable to be comprehended. Like, we just don't have a way to break things down. House of Leaves seems intimidating on the surface, but as you read the book, it's actually very funny, very interesting, engaging, and it allows you to take what you want from it without hand feeding it to the reader. You know, it definitely treats us like we're somebody that is reading into a secret which we shouldn't be discovering, but is there just haunting us in the back of our minds. And as I was reading this book, I became very obsessed with it. And just to do this review in front of you, I feel very amateurish and also intimidated with the fact that it's not an easy one to break down into many pieces. In fact, I'll probably have to read this in some later years, because there was a lot of things that did go over my head. There's many things that seem coincidental, but not. There's basically no part of the story that you can't just glean over, because everything is essential in some way or another. And I love the fact that this author has written so many different books since then, where he's explored different avenues of what is called ergodic literature, which is basically a fancy way of saying that it plays around with our engagement to the text. So other books would be like where you skip different chapters to come to a different outcome in the story. But with this one, it's where you come to a different outcome by how you decide to interpret everything. I will be warning you though, if you decide to read this book, whatever you do not go online, do not engage with fan theories. There are so many. It is the Yggdrasil of book theories because it is limitless. So I advise you to take your time. Don't let this book be spoiled for you. Enjoy it for what it is, because it is quite a wild ride. The only complaint I would take away from this is there were certain sections of the book that didn't quite work for me. Most notably would be the ending, because it seemed as if the author has an ending hidden within the rest of this material. So as you finish the main story, there's all these appendices in the back of the book which come with like collages and letters from Johnny's mother while she was institutionalized at this place called the Whalestow Asylum. And there's also additional material which may or may not suggest that the entire documentary of Navidson's record was actually real, which I love, because this is a book which defies one type of interpretation. It is about multiple types of truth, or layers of truth, I would say, and nobody quite has the entire picture in our mind. It's up to the reader as the audience to decide how everything fits together in this house. And I've become very much interested in the concept of houses afterwards, because it gets into some very philosophical territories as much as it is a scientific book and a piece of fiction. Underneath it all, for me, House of Leaves feels like an examination of this deep guilt and regret, either by the author or by the many characters he writes, and just how we cope with it, how we move past that, and if there is love that we can hold on to that will endure the darkness that surrounds it. It is a very highly recommended book. I would say if you're looking to get into some bigger, more intimidating novels, this is a good place to start, because it is one that might not hold your hand at times, but it allows you to go out and seek your own direction and come back when you want to. And you'll always read it again and you'll find new things, new references you may have missed the first time. And I love seeing how the story connected in the footnotes, especially because a lot of people have issues with Johnny interrupting the text, which he does several times. But as you continue to read it, it actually rewards you with understanding what is really going on with him, his whole connection to Zampano, and also how this house has this great effect on him. I definitely give this book a 2 thumbs up and highly recommend people to check it out. It is definitely aged well, and I also believe that people should write like this more. You know, we should be doing crazy things which might scare us, because there is a lot to be gained from it, a lot to learn from how different books play around with the ideas that they discuss, and it is overall an amazing piece of literature. Thank you everyone for watching. Hope you have a nice day, and stay tuned for the next review. Bye bye.